Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 25. O'Neill did it again. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. And welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I am author E.W. Barnes. With me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're going to talk about the stories told in a most favorite and least favorite episode from Stargate SG1 Season 7. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing quite well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And how are things in your writing world?
Well, I have received the final pass of edits for the first Zara book. So that's what I'm going to be doing now until I get that done. But hopefully this will be the final round of edits, and then I'll move on to getting it published. So that's exciting. I'm looking forward to that. This will be my first published book.
That is very exciting. When do you expect to, and obviously because things come up, so, we're not going to hold you to an exact date, but do you have an idea of when you can expect Zara to be published for fans who would like to go out and buy it and don't want to read it on Kindle Vella?
Only a vague idea. I'm hoping within the next month or two. I don't have something specific because I don't know all of the steps, and I kind of want to take my time. I might throw it out for some ARC readers, so I want to give them some time to read it before the actual publication date. So a month might be too soon because I haven't even finished this edit pass, though I think this will probably go pretty quick. But 2 months seems reasonable, I think.
And for our listeners, ARC stands for Advanced Review Copy. These are the folks who get the final draft just before publication to be able to read it. And if they choose, there's no obligation, but if they choose to leave a review on their favorite review sites, such as Amazon and Goodreads and all of that. If someone was interested in being an ARC reader for you, how would they let you know that?
Ooh, that's a good question. Best way would be to just contact me on one of the social media platforms that I'm on, or sign up for my newsletter. Send me a note, maybe just respond to a newsletter that I send out. There'll be another one coming in a few days. Of course, after by the time this comes out, I guess the newsletter will have already been out. So maybe social media is the better way to go. Just look for one of my comments on there and reply.
Your social media locations and your newsletter sign up are available on your website, right?
Yeah, just go to michaelgrayford.com. At the bottom of the website, there's little icons for all the different social media platforms that I'm on. I spend most of the time on my Facebook, probably. But if someone sends me a note on Instagram or whatever, then I'll see that as well.
And we'll make sure that the link for Michael's website is in the show notes on both the YouTube podcast and the Spotify podcast. And how's Deep Dark and Zara 2? Any movement on those?
Let's see. Zara 2 is basically on hold for the moment. I'm just trying to finish Zara 1 right now. As far as Deep Dark, I am still posting episodes onto Kindle Vella and to my Patreon and Ream accounts. And I am slowly working through notes from an alpha read. So I'll be incorporating those, and I'll be doing another pass to get to my beta draft. But that's going to be a little ways out because, like I said, I'm focusing more on Zara 1 right now.
Understandable.
All right, where are you?
I finished another chapter in Ecliptic, which is the second book in the Adventures of the Empyrean Guard series. I think this was chapter 8. So now I've plotted out chapter 9 and need to start putting words into that framework. Still waiting to hear on the short story. And I have finished the audiobook of the first in my time travel series, the Temporal Protection Course series. That book is called Biding Time, the Chestnut Coven, and the digital voice narration audiobook is available in full. The entire audiobook is available on YouTube for people to listen to for free. I have a whole playlist for the series, so if they start the playlist, they can listen to the prequel novella, which is called The Forest of Time, which is a fun little dinosaur adventure, and then go right into the first book in the series. And tomorrow I'll have 5 chapters of the second book of the series available on YouTube. So moving forward on that, that's going pretty well.
Oh, that's great.
Thanks.
It's amazing. You got a whole book up there.
Got a whole book
audio
up there. Yeah. Have you come across anything interesting, any good stories in books or movies or TV in the last week?
Let's see. I just saw recently the latest Mission Impossible movie.
What'd you think?
We may have talked about it a little bit last week. I really liked it. I love the setup for it. I think they do a good job with those movies and keeping interesting stories. It's very timely. It's about, obviously has elements of AI. I guess I don't want to spoil too much. People haven't seen it. But yeah, it's good. I like the stakes that are presented and sort of when you think about like what could happen. It's sort of a standard sci-fi plot, right? Over the last few decades, I guess started with Asimov, right? From way back with his robot books. But I thought they did a good job of mixing that concept with the Mission Impossible universe. The only thing for me, I thought from a writing perspective, it dropped a bit in the middle. I know that when they write scripts, oftentimes they'll have insert fight scene here or insert chase scene here. Kind of felt that way. This is like, hey, here's a few chase scenes we're just throwing in the middle of the movie, which is okay. I mean, that's sort of expected in these types of movies. I felt they were kind of uninspired. Maybe there could have been a little more writing on like how to make that more interesting. They felt sort of, I don't know, it felt like I'd seen them before, so they kind of dragged on a bit for me. But then I thought it started getting better toward the end as well.
Yeah.
And obviously it sets up for the next movie too. But overall, I really enjoyed it.
I would say one of my favorite, it's more than a scene, it's a sequence of scenes. Segment of the movie is, and I don't think this is a spoiler because this was alluded to a bit in trailers, so I'm gonna keep it very broad and general for people who haven't seen the movie yet. But the train action scenes are amazing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's why I think they pulled it out at the end, right? They started having more interesting things and getting us back to the plot.
Yeah,
I thought that worked well.
I actually found myself on the edge of my seat because things were happening that I wasn't expecting and didn't expect, and I was like, "This is fun."
How about you? What have you read, seen, watched last week? That's good.
We have finished watching the season finale of Marvel's Secret Invasion. That's a 6-episode series. I don't know if there's going to be a season 2. It could go into a season 2. It may not go into a season 2 because I could also see it going into resolving the issues from this season in movies. I can see that happening too.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I have not done any research to see if there are any additional seasons planned, but we finished watching it. It was very enjoyable. It wrapped up well. It wrapped up, I think, a little quickly. I think for considering all of the setup that took place in the previous episodes, but it wasn't unsatisfying. It was good. I think it was an overall a good series. And that's pretty much it. I will admit I was going to hold off on reading the Stormlight Archive 4 book because Brandon Sanderson doesn't expect to have the final book finished until next year. So I thought, okay, I'll just read other books and then hold off on the 4th book until it gets closer to when the 5th book is published. And I couldn't do it. I read the 4th book. I'm starting the 4th.
That's good testimony for the quality of those books then.
I am invested in the world. I'm invested in the characters, and I want to know what's going to happen next.
Are you like up on the Marvel Cinematic Universe in general?
I guess, yes. I mean, I don't do any outside reading. I just watch the entertainment that's being presented. So I was not a comic book person. I actually came into the Marvel Universe kind of reluctantly because the first of the Marvel movies that I saw was Thor. And when I first heard about Thor, I thought, how desperate are these writers that they're having to tap myths in order to create movies? And then I watched the movie and I said, this is brilliant. And I take back all of the things I was thinking. And that's when I got hooked, because the quality of the writing and the acting and the directing, I'm a Kenneth Branagh fan, and I was hooked then. But I only really watch the movies, watch the television series. I don't think I got to the end of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but everything else I've watched and I have enjoyed. Why did you ask that question? I'm curious.
I mean, I guess I'm similar in that respect. I also haven't really read the comic books, even like the old cartoons from back in the day. I watched like Spider-Man and X-Men and stuff like that, but obviously it's completely different in the cinematic universe.
Yeah.
The reason I ask is the latest round of movies and TV shows, for me at least, I feel like the TV shows have been better than the movies.
Yeah.
Not counting the last couple of movies, which I thought were really good, like Guardians of the Galaxy. The last phase of movies, I thought, kind of dropped the ball, in particular just from the writing. Like, the acting is still good, the production's still good. I think like that stuff is still up there. I felt like they just dropped it from the writing, and the TV shows were a little more interesting. They let us get into the characters a little bit more, have a little bit more complex plots. I just thought they worked generally better. I haven't seen Secret Invasion yet, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. I generally try to wait till the shows are done because I don't like to wait a week between watching the episodes. So now that it's there, I'll check that one out.
Maybe we should think about talking about some of the recent Marvel movies and what we as writers might do differently in how the stories are told.
And that's not a bad idea to throw on the list. Do kind of like what we're doing with Stargate, where we did a high movie and a low movie, maybe.
Yeah. Are you ready now to talk about a favorite and least favorite episode of Stargate SG1 Season 7?
I am. Let's go for it.
Let's begin. Let's start with the story told in one of our favorite episodes from Stargate SG1 Season 7, The Lost City, Parts 1 and 2. And I will read the synopsis from the Stargate Fandom Wiki. As SG1 continues to search for the lost city of the ancients, they uncover an ancient repository of knowledge which may hold the secret of its location. However, the safety of Earth is threatened when it's revealed that Anubis is planning an imminent attack. Stargate Command has been shut down for a 3-month review, with Dr. Elizabeth Weir serving as the replacement for Major General George S. Hammond. So what did you like about this episode, Mike?
Yeah, this is interesting. And there's a number of things I enjoyed with this one. And right from the beginning, I was laughing because Jack got the ancient repository of knowledge again. You knew that was going to happen. Like looking around, like, how are we going to get this? Like, come on, you know where this is going. You know he's going to get a thing wrapped around his head. Sure enough, there we go. That was funny. I like that they set up that this time Asgard are not going to be there to help, right? They've been trying to contact them, can't get a hold of them. And so when Jack gets that thing on his head, how are they going to get this? How are they going to get this knowledge out of him this time? How are they going to save him? And that's something they use throughout this show, obviously, throughout this episode. Like, they kind of know, like, okay, we don't have a way to get this out of him. So they're sort of saying their goodbyes. I thought that was nice, how they go to hang out at his house, to kind of spend some quiet time together before what they perceive as the end coming. Thought there were some good moments there. and also kind of funny when each of the different groups arrives. Then I like how they keep sort of sticking the knife in throughout the episode. Not only do you have that thing with Jack, it's like now it's like, oh no, Hammond is out at the SG1. He's no longer in charge. It's a huge blow to not only them and not only their plans for what's coming immediately, but also for the viewer. It's like, oh, we don't want Hammond to go. So that was a good upping of the stakes. And then they find out that Anubis is coming. He's on his way. Everything's sort of coming together at this moment. I liked the president a lot. I like how they wrote him with intelligence and wisdom and compassion, but also with a sense of humor. He played that really well. Let's see, I like that Anubis, when he's coming there to attack, he doesn't do the obvious thing and just come in and, guns blazing. He tests the water first, right? So we see these aren't just brutes, right? They're like, these are intelligent beings. There's a reason they're kind of system lords. They're not just rash entities, right? They think about what they're going to do first. I thought that was smart. The bond between the characters is very evident. I really enjoyed that. I thought they handled that very well. One of the great things was seeing the president bring the hammer down on Kinsey. I think you've wanted that so long in the series. Every time Kinsey's on, you're just like, God, this guy's horrible. Can't they get rid of this person? And then we finally get to see the president, someone who has the authority, just shut him down. I thought that was great. They did a good job of building up Kinsey throughout the series up to this point, right? So that everybody dislikes this guy. Not only SG1, the viewers dislike him. Finally, we get to see some comeuppance there. And then I like, once again, how O'Neill loses the ability to communicate with the rest of the team as he slowly becomes more and more under the sway of the alien knowledge. Obviously, this goes back to the previous version of this where he gets the alien knowledge dumped into his head. But they could have just made that so he acquires the knowledge, but he can still talk to them and relay that to them, right? Like, that would have been the easy way to handle it. So they get what information they need, and maybe it slowly drips into his head so they don't have access to all of it at once. But they didn't do that. They made it so it was a challenge to get the knowledge that was in there. And basically, they just had to rely on O'Neill to subconsciously deliver the information to them, not knowing what they were getting, but hoping it related to what they were trying to do. I really like that. I mean, obviously, this is a carryover from the previous episode, but I thought they also did that well here. I loved seeing Hammond take command of the Prometheus. That was a great decision. We get to see him in action, finally taking part in the mission. I thought that was awesome. And then I liked how it's not quite wrapped up all tidy at the end because we still have O'Neill left in stasis. So they give you a conclusion to the episode, but there's still something left out for them to continue on. I thought that was a good idea. One thing that struck me as kind of funny is the search for this lost city. It's been going on for a bit now through various episodes, and it feels kind of like Finding the Princess in Super Mario, if you're familiar with that, where it's like he gets to the end, he gets in the castle, and it's like, sorry, the princess is in another castle. It's like every time it's like, oh, we found a lost city. No, this isn't the lost city. So that's kind of funny. But overall, it was just such a satisfying episode. We get to see this culmination of so much that has come before, and it was such a good payoff for all their struggles against the goal. We'll just finally see, now we have something powerful that can take down one of these big ships. Yeah, I really enjoyed this pair of episodes. Okay, I rambled enough. Tell us what you liked.
It was all really good. I agree. Everything that you said was there were multiple highlights in these episodes. Like you, I enjoyed that very first scene of the very first of this two-part episode where you get not only exposition, setting up what the story is going to be about, but great character development. Again, they're really good at that. You get a little bit about the character and then you also get an idea of where you're going. The same with the introduction scene where you meet Dr. Weir and then Kinsey, right? You've got character development and exposition working together. It's just woven so beautifully. I really enjoy it. All of the exposition in these scenes are set up naturally and organically and doesn't feel like you're just getting an info dump, and yet you're getting a lot of critical information about the story and what's coming and the framework for it. And exposition was well written. I think the way they moved from scene to scene to scene was brilliant. And I don't know if that's only a writing issue or whether it's also an editing issue, but we have essentially an A story, a B story, and a C story in this 2-part episode. And they're all interwoven just perfectly. You're left on a cliff with the A story, and then you move to the B story. You're left on a cliff with the B story, and you move to the C story. You're left on a cliff with the C story, and you move back to the A story. And it's all just done so well. The story moves quickly, but not too quickly. You don't get lost. And there is enough story here to hold through strongly for both episodes. I think it's really a well done pair of episodes. Is there anything that you might have done differently?
There's only a couple little things maybe that I could think of. There's probably more if I really, if I watched it again and analyzed it more. But the things that struck me as I was watching, I felt like knowing that, like, once Jack had the knowledge in his head, it seemed like they would have kept trying to contact the Asgard, because you know where this is going, right? He either gets this stuff out of his head or he's dead, pretty much, or equivalent to dead. So it seemed like they kind of gave up on that. Like, oh, they mentioned that they tried to contact him, they couldn't get a hold of him, and then that's the last they mentioned of it. It seems like they wouldn't stop there once Jack had that in his head. But, from a plot perspective, they set up what they needed to set up and they moved on from it. So it's kind of, that's a really, really small issue. And the only other thing, and this isn't necessarily specific to this episode, is with Kinsey. He's very consistent, but he almost seemed like a caricature a bit. He's just this one guy. We don't really even know what his motivation is, at least not in here. Maybe it was a little more in some previous episodes that I had forgotten. But he seems like just obsessed with shutting down or controlling the Stargate. Like, that's his thing. It's like his one thing. And he comes across like as just this evil villain guy almost, right? With little awareness of the potential harm or I don't know, like it seemed like there could be a little bit more acknowledgement on his part of like, they've done well, but this isn't the right way to go. Like I said earlier, he was such a good job of making us hate that character that we get that good payoff in this episode. So again, very, very minor point. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other things, but those are the two things that come to mind. What would you do to tweak it or improve it?
Things that I noticed, and again, they're really niggling. I mean, really small. And the first one was that the opening scene for part 2 felt a little abrupt. And I'm not sure that that's really a writing issue. Again, that might have been an editing thing where they had to stick either the commercial or the opening credits or something, because originally this was aired on commercial television. So I don't know how that might have changed now that it's being, streamed and you can just watch it straight through. So it just felt a little abrupt, whereas the opening scene for part 1 was tight. It was well done. It was perfect. The other thing that I thought was kind of odd in a rewatch was there's a scene where Braytak is attacked by Ronan, the pilot of the ship that they got a hold of to take them to Proc LaRouche Teonos. And Braytak is dying, and he rings them up from the collapsing dome and then falls to the floor. And they don't rush to his side. They all just kind of stand there. And he says, secure the ship. So Sam goes and secures the ship. But that's it. O'Neill sits down and uses the power of the ancients to heal him. It just seems like there's a lack of energy focused on Braytak, who's on the floor bleeding. These are really niggling things to point out because it's all I could find. I think it's otherwise a really great pair of episodes. So there you are.
That's funny. I noticed that too. He's there. I mean, when they come in and they first see him, it's almost like this guy's dead or dying. Like, aren't you going to help him? What rating would you give this?
Oh, I give this one a 10. I think this is one of the best. And again, it's a pair of episodes, so it's kind of, but I think together they make one of the best stories that you can see in Stargate. How about you?
Not knowing sort of what's to come, I would give it a 9 or a 10 as well. I think this pair of episodes is such a good payoff for all their struggles against the Goa'uld. It blends so many things so well. Like you said, the different storylines going at the same time, the stakes that are set up, the transitions that are coming for the show are hinted at. It's so rewarding at the end when when you see them finally win this huge battle. It's excellent. I think this is the best of the favorite stories that we've done so far for me.
Yeah.
Significantly so. When I think back to Stargate, this is like one of the episodes that I remember because it's like that impactful in the series. So yeah, I definitely would put it up there as well.
Let's continue with the story told in one of our least favorite episodes of Stargate SG1 from Season 7, Resurrection. And I'm going to read the synopsis now from the Stargate Fandom Wiki. SG1 minus Colonel Jack O'Neill are in Los Angeles, where NID agent Malcolm Barrett discovers a rogue NID experiment. Also, a Goa'uld explosive device is activated, and they have only hours to deactivate it, or the entire city will be destroyed. What did you like about this episode, Mike?
I think they had an interesting setup for this. When you get there and there's these mass casualties of the NID, like 30 people are dead or something like that. Like that's a significant thing in the Stargate universe that we've been watching. You don't typically see a show start like that. So it's interesting, like what happened here. We don't necessarily too worried about these people, right? Because they've been set up as the bad guys. It's still a pretty significant event, and you're thinking, okay, what caused this? And is it still out there, whatever it is? So I like that setup. I think there's an interesting idea also with trying to tap into Goa'uld DNA because they pass their memories or their knowledge through the DNA somehow, and trying to use that, right, to create this hybrid that they called Anna in this show, or in this episode, to learn what the Goa'uld know, right? Get as much inside information as they can. It's pretty smart, actually, if that's a feasible thing in this universe. They gave themselves a time limit with the bomb. I think they needed something like that because otherwise, they could just continue interrogating this person or seeing what's going on for months, right? They needed something to give it a little bit of momentum. I like that. They set up Sekhmet as a sort of alternate personality in this woman. Like the Goa'uld is there and it's fighting for dominance over the human version. So it's not like necessarily the blend that they had hoped for. So it's going to be harder to get that information out of her. I thought it was all very interesting. I think they had some interesting concepts in this episode. Yeah. What about you? What aspects of this episode did you like?
I agree with you about the setup of it. I have not watched this episode in a very long time because it's not one of my favorites. It's not one I like to go back to. And in watching it again, I was struck by what you just said about how the setup is really cool. You've got NAD agents that have been killed and, you're seeing body bags being wheeled away and it's really intense. And I was like, yeah, this is actually pretty good. What is it I don't like about this one again? And then, of course, I realized later on what I don't like about it. But you're absolutely correct. The setup was good. I think Dr. Kepler as a villain, I really enjoyed how creepy he was. He had this sort of... Have you ever seen the movie In the Line of Fire with John Malkovich and Clint Eastwood?
I don't think so. I don't remember if I did.
It's a good movie. It's a thriller, more of a psychological thriller.
Okay.
And John Malkovich plays the villain, and Dr. Kepler reminded me a lot of that character. And it's really, in the movie In the Line of Fire, he's a really great villain, layered and complex, There's also a Silence of the Lambs reference, which I didn't think actually really applied. Dr. Kepler did not remind me of Hannibal Lecter. However, I believe the Silence of the Lambs reference was to show you where we were going to be going in this episode. I think that was quite purposeful. They wanted to sort of recreate a Stargate SG1 Silence of the Lambs thing, and I don't think it really worked. But that's what I really liked. I liked just the villain was good. And to me, the villain was Dr. Kepler, not Sekhmet. Sekhmet was just doing what Sekhmet does. Dr. Kepler was the orchestrator of this entire situation. And so to me, he was the villain, and I thought he was quite good.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to have to check out In the Line of Fire. I like Clint Eastwood, and I like John Malkovich, and I like thrillers. So that sounds something right up my alley. Let's see. As far as what I would improve, I think there was, like I said, there was an interesting mix of concepts here. I didn't pick up on the Silence of the Lambs thing. I got the reference, right, to, they said something with like Clarice or Starling or something like that. I forget. But I noticed that, but I didn't see how it was sort of kind of setting the tone or foreshadowing the type of episode. But you're right. That definitely makes sense now that I hear you say it. There's a few things here. Let me start with this sort of small thing. I kind of wish we had been left with something more at the end, like they had learned something from this or gotten something they could use against the Goa'uld in the future or something. And maybe they do. Maybe there's something that comes back in a future episode. I don't remember. It just felt like it was like you could excise this from the Stargate storyline and nothing would change, which isn't necessarily bad. But when you're dealing with a Goa'uld and you have this hybrid, I kind of wanted it to have a ripple effect into the future, even if it was just a small butterfly effect, right?
From my recollection, I don't think there are any ripple effects from this. I can't remember any.
Yeah, okay. I mean, again, it's not a huge thing. There's a lot of episodes that are just sort of one-off things that they go and do a mission and come back. That's fine. Just given the sort of setup and kind of the intensity, I don't know if that's the right word, of this, what they were dealing with, I would have wanted something to go into the future. But anyway, that my bigger complaint was more tonally, I think. The episode dark, right? From the beginning to the end, they set it up with death at the start. And it just kind of kept going down. From the imagery of her drawings to her being locked in this cage and being made by someone and being tortured, to having a Nazi essentially there as the bad guy, to the very grim ending. I guess it's not necessarily bad, but it's just a lot darker than most of the rest of the SG1 show. And part of that was there was very little humor to it, which makes sense given the context of this show. It just felt kind of out of place to me. I don't know how I would improve that other than not make it so grim, add a little more humor in, just to make it tonally more like the rest of the show, I think would be the first step. Because I think they had some good plot setup in there. Some interesting character setup. Yeah. What about you? Help me out here. What were some things that you would do to improve it?
I agree with you. I wrote down, this is not sci-fi. This is a horror psychological thriller story. And we saw the same thing when we were looking at, the name of the episode is escaping me, the one where they found themselves in a medieval European village.
Right.
And one of the things that we discussed about that one was if they took it out of medieval Europe and stuck it into a different culture and gave it more of a sci-fi framework for it, it might have worked better. And I'm kind of wondering if the same thing might have happened here and taking it out of the horror and psychological thriller, because I think the goal of this story was to present Anna, who was the clone, who was, the human Goa'uld hybrid clone, in a very sympathetic way, and to focus on her and Dr. Jackson's attempt to try to reach her and save her, and ultimately failing and having that failure resonate with us. But instead, we're too distracted by the darkness and Dr. Kepler and with the psychological stuff. And are they going to be able to do this and the creepiness? And I think it just didn't work. And I think if they had taken it out of this sort of horror realm, we could have then made that connection to then have the impact we were looking for. And I agree with you. The plot elements that were trying to move the story forward were really good.
I think if they had set up SG1 to be more varied in its style and tone throughout, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad episode. I appreciate what they tried to do here, and I don't think it was horrible. It just seemed out of place in this show.
Yeah. And there were some things that I think were unrealistic. And perhaps if we had followed through on the realism, we would have taken that edge up a little bit and not stayed in such a dark place. For example, I can't imagine that they would not have moved her to a secure facility that was under their control, not in a rogue NID facility. Knock her out with whatever, anesthesia they need and ship her to someplace secure where they can interrogate her under their own roof, where they have control over everything. That was one thing that didn't seem realistic to me. And the same thing with Dr. Kepler. They kept him on site. No, you throw him in handcuffs and you take him off to a secure facility, secure NID facility, and you interrogate him there. So those things didn't make sense to me. And then, of course, there were the convenient things. How could there be no fire system in the cell? She lights things on fire and they have to grab a fire extinguisher and open the cell. They have a Gould in there, or the goal is to have a Gould in there. Why would they have it so that you had to open the cell if something happened? Not having two guards on Kepler. And what's the idea of the open door? This is an NID agent. Of course he's going to try to escape. So just one guard that gets close enough to get tasered? That didn't make sense.
Yeah, not only that, he's like, let me walk in here right next to him for no reason.
Exactly.
It's just, yeah, you're right. That's silly. I didn't even think about the convenient things that they made for the plot, but that's true. I did wonder as I was watching, like, why are they just like hanging out here? That seemed weird. Like, and then, oh, we have this bomb. Instead of getting that bomb on a helicopter and getting it out into the middle of the ocean, like, oh, let's just mess with it here around all these people.
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that? Like, what if you accidentally trigger it? It's not bolted down to anything. It's in this box. Just fly it away.
Yeah. And the other thing is, you spoke about the end, and I think the end, it was really unsatisfying. There was nothing that led to it and no payoff at the end. She shoots Kepler and then she dies. And I'm not even sure how she died, because she was theoretically supposed to live for another 3 years and then her death was going to be horrible.
I thought she killed herself.
But then why would she say to Jackson, you didn't save me? Well, how is he supposed to save you if you shoot yourself? That didn't come across to me.
Yeah, I think that's where I was going at with, like, I wanted there to be something affected in the universe, because you're right, it was unsatisfying. It's like, okay, they're both dead. That fits with the tone that they were going for, right? They're making this a dark episode. That was the point of it, obviously. But that doesn't mean it was satisfying from SG1 viewers' perspective. Good for them for trying something different, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I think it didn't work. And I think your point about it not being tonally in line with the rest of Stargate is really the foundational problem. I think there could have been a way to make this a dark episode while still staying true to that tone that I think would have made it work better.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think you kind of hit on it.
I mean, just injecting a little more humor, making the ending not so grim, not starting off with 30 dead bodies being hauled away. Like, just tone that down a bit, and I think they could have made this concept work. In concept, I mean, you have the Gould in there. That the idea fits into the Stargate universe. I think just pushed it a little too far, maybe.
I agree. So what rating would you give Resurrection?
I would give this a 5. I think it's not as bad as I was expecting, given the other ratings I've seen for it. I would watch it again, but it wouldn't be one that I would seek out. I thought it was just it was interesting enough that if I didn't remember much about it, I wouldn't mind seeing it again, even though it kind of leaves me feeling a little flat at the end. Yeah, I think I would give it a 5. Are you?
I give it a 3. I would watch this one over One False Step and The Light, but I would choose others over this one. Of all our least favorites, I would choose Sight Unseen, and I would choose some of the other ones over this one if I had only those to watch. We thank you for joining us as we talked about these stories told in a most and least favorite episode of Stargate SG1 Season 7. We want to throw out a big thank you to our Patreon supporters. We are so grateful for your support and your encouragement. The Stories Told podcast is available on YouTube and Spotify, and we thank you for liking and subscribing or following depending on where you're listening. It may not be a big deal to you, but it means a lot to us. You can find Michael Grayford at michaelgrayford.com and on YouTube at Michael Grayford, and E.W. Barnes at a1000years.com, as well as on YouTube at e.w.barnes-author. And those links are in the show notes. Join us next time as we look at the stories told in a most and least favorite episode of Stargate SG1 Season 8, Reckoning, Parts 1 and 2, and Icon. Thank you, Mike. This was fun.
I agree. Very good episodes. Thank you.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.
Bye.